Okay, I am Linda English, the Executive Director of Dirty Freehub. I put this slide in specifically because I always forget to introduce myself, which is pretty silly. And I am currently coming to you from down by Cabo, Mexico, where we are busy. Kevin, who is also online tonight, and I are busy scouting routes furiously. I know we're really taking one for the team here, as it's about 75 degrees here every day. So go ahead and next slide. And you might hear Kevin popping in. He's the Director of Routes and Technologies, and he is currently helping us manage this webinar tonight. So many thanks to Kevin for being here and willing to play the technologist role. It gets a little hard to talk and click buttons at the same time for me and Kim, so appreciate him doing that. So next slide. Some of you might not be that familiar with Dirty Freehub, so we're just going to take a second to talk a little bit about Dirty Freehub. We are all about gravel bike routes. We've put in 14,000 miles worth of curated gravel ride guides across the Western United States. And in these ride guides, we like to contain a lot of great information, including podcasts from great speakers like Kim Ely, who's on tonight. We have approximately 500 cyclists a day that will come to us to find where in the world is the right gravel route. It's not always that easy to find them, and we specialize in the best of the best. We really like to go out there. We spend a lot of time finding the great places to ride. We have approximately 20,000 followers across platforms. And we're also a nonprofit, which means that we are fueled by your generous donations. So that's actually a major portion of how we are supported, as by people who donate to our organization. And we really deeply appreciate that. So without further ado, next slide, Kim. Kim, who in the world is Dr. Kim Ely? Or should we say, AKA Rock Doc? So, Kim, tell me a little bit about yourself. There's 3 reasons why we wanted to talk to you tonight, specifically about this topic. Tell me a little bit about who you are.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So, I guess one of the reasons why I'm here is that I was about 15 years old when I decided that I wanted to be a geologist. I guess not so many kids make that kind of decision early on, but I had done that. So high school into university, I did a Bachelor of Science majoring in geology, and then I worked as a geologist for a number of years before returning to uni to do a PhD. And I was always just really interested in learning how landscapes evolved and how whatever the geology was under the surface influenced that. I no longer work professionally as a geologist, but every ride, every hike, or every road trip has me looking at landscapes through that geological lens. And I guess just an extra bit of information, you might already hear that I'm not from Oregon originally. I'm from Australia. And so some of the words that I say might sound a little bit different to you. So you might say basalt and I'll say basalt.
Yes, we've had an ongoing conversation about that specific word, have we not? Kim does really undersells herself in 2 other ways. She also lives in Bend, Oregon, so where this route is located, and she rides this route all the time. And she's a really fast cyclist. So for me, I'm amazed that she can see any of the rocks at all as she's whizzing by them. But I think occasionally she must slow down. So I really rely on Kim to give us an insider view for tonight's topic, specifically because she's a cyclist, she's a geologist, and she lives in the area for which this route is, which is water and lava. So when we were talking about water and lava one time, it was like, wait a second, this route has so many cool geological features that we're going to talk about tonight. It was like, why shouldn't we be sharing them with all of you? So I'm very, very excited that she's willing to let us ask her lots of questions specifically about water and lava and what are we seeing on this specific route. So it's the geological secrets of the water and lava route is tonight's topic.
All right. right, thanks, Linda. I thought I would get started here with just an orientation of the route, as not everyone is familiar with it. But this is the map from the Dirty Freehub Ride Guide, which is a format that many of you will be familiar with. And the route starts from the Cascade Lakes Welcome Centre at the top end of this map, and then makes its way down along the Deschutes River, mostly on a mix of single track and some old logging rail trails. We save the serious uphill for pavement, up firstly a paved path to the base of Lava Butte and then a road to the top. Then the return mostly follows the same route with a little loop of some fun single track in the Sun River area before you head back up along the river. For the numbers people, it's 31 miles with 1,400 feet of elevation gain. And now I'm going to change the map. This is what it looks like with a geological map.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of colors. I hope there's not going to be a test on the end of what I'm looking at.
There's no test, and just seeing that there's a lot of colors is the purpose of showing you this. So the geological units of different age and compositions are shown by the different colors. So for here, all you need to see is that there's about 10 colors on this map. There's a really interesting geological story here. So to set the scene, go back about 1 million years, which is a blink of an eye in geological time. The landscape of this area was really quite different. It was still a volcanic landscape, but with a more subtle topography of low-sloped shield volcanoes. The steep high peaks of the Cascades were yet to be born. About 500,000 years ago, that began to change with not one, but two big volcanic systems. The Deschutes River and the lava and water route trace along where the volcanic rocks from the Cascade subduction zone meet those from the Newberry Volcanic Complex. And while the ages and compositions of these rocks are sort of fairly similar, they have very different origins, and that makes this area really quite special.
So Kim, if I was standing there 1 million years ago, what would it look like?
It would probably just be if you looked out across the landscape, it would just be more subtle topographic features. You wouldn't have the Cascade Mountains, and you wouldn't have the big peaks of the Newberry complex to the south of us. And you probably would not have all that peppering of little cinder cones making sharp peaks all over the place as well.
So it sounds pretty boring. It sounds kind of just flat, open area. Is that what I hear you saying?
Possibly a bit less exciting, yeah, but I'm never going to say rocks are boring. They're just different.
Okay.
All right, so shall we start our ride and check out what's going on?
Yep, let's go for a ride. This is a virtual ride tonight.
It's a virtual ride. So we're going to start from the Welcome Centre and head on out. So first, as you leave the Welcome Centre and you go under the tunnel, or you go through the tunnel under the road, you're riding over a mixture of rocks from the Cascade subduction, the Cascade subduction zone, which has made the Cascades, High Cascades range. So there's two ways of really classifying volcanic rock types. It can be by composition, and it also can be by texture. So the chemical composition part is dependent on the percentage of silica contained in a rock. And you might have heard terms like basalt, andesite, dacite, and rhyolite. The texture part, I think, is more exciting, as that gives us insight into the process and how the rock's formed. So the types of rocks that we will encounter on water and lava include lavas of different compositions. And a lava is a volcanic rock that's erupted as a molten rock, which flows away from the volcanic vent. Another type of rock that we encounter are cinders, which are also called scoria. And these come from a gas-rich basaltic lava that has erupted fairly explosively. Sometimes this is called fire fountaining, and you might have seen videos of this happening in places like Hawaii. The fragments, when they get flung up in the air, they solidify in the air and then rain down, forming this unconsolidated cone of debris. Another rock type that we encounter on this route is pumice. And this forms from a very, very gas-rich lava, which the eruption basically erupts a froth of glassy lava. And this, when pumice then cools and hardens, it contains so many air bubbles that it will float.
I always think of pumice as sort of being like popcorn rock, because it always feels like it's so light and airy that it just there's almost nothing to it as compared to like when I pick up like lava rock, right? Am I thinking about that right, Kim?
Yeah, no, you are. And aside from all the bubbles, the rest of the rock material is basically glass. So if you can imagine, like, it's got that texture that if you were like rubbing pieces of glass together, it's the same sort of thing. So it's like it's not even fine grained, it's amorphous. It's made out of glass. And so that's what makes it really rough.
Oh, sorry. So in the very beginning, when we've just gotten through the tunnel, there's all these different types of rocks all in this one area. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, so in this area, there's a mixture of basalt and also a rock type called tuff or tuff. And this is a rock type that's made from very, very explosive types of volcanism where, there's a huge explosion and like gas and rock fragments and crystals get thrown up in the air, sometimes like for many, many hundreds of meters in the air or even miles. And then this rains down and solidifies into rock as it cools. And so this also occurs in this area. And a diagnostic feature of this tuff is the presence of broken fragments and crystals, which sometimes it's hard to see in just a sample that you pick up off of the ground. But if you can get the opportunity to look at it under a microscope, it can be quite a spectacular mosaic of pieces. So as we head down towards the river, we're riding over basalt flows and also two separate units of tuff that have been dated, so we know that one lies on top of the other. And all of these rocks have similar overlapping ages, which they're not very precisely dated in this particular area, but we know that they formed in the last million years, but not more recently than 15,000 years. And despite its name, the tuff is less resistant to erosion, so you don't really see much of it exposed on the surface. So if you come across big chunks of rock in this area or little cliffs, they're more likely to be basalt.
Interesting. Okay, now this is the million-dollar question that everybody always wants to know. If you've done this route, you're riding along and all of a sudden there's this huge rock. And this recently, I think this was only a couple of years ago that this rock all of a sudden rolled into the middle of our route. And I know at Dirty Freehub, I was in Arizona when this happened, and I probably had 15 phone calls from people calling me to tell me that there was now this massive rock that was in the middle of our route. So tell me about this rock, Kim. How in the world did this rock get here?
Well, as you just said, it just fell here. And in a couple of slides, I've actually got a picture of where it came from. But first, I would just tell you about, because one of the things in that flurry of phone calls was a phone call from Kevin saying, how much does the rock weigh? And obviously my kitchen scale is not going to figure that out. So I went down to the rock and with a tape measure, measured it up so I could work out the volume approximately. And from there you can work out how much.
Wait. Before you tell people, okay, so I would love for everybody just to write down a number for how much do you think that rock actually weighs? So is it 500 pounds? Is it 1,000? Is it 20 pounds? I don't know. What do you think? Okay, there you go. Now that we've thought about it.
And if they can put it into the Q&A section, I would love to see these answers. And Kim, aren't we going to talk about how much this rock weighs in terms of automobiles?
I've got like an endless list of comparisons to offer because, everyone's got their standard measurements, right?
Okay, cool.
So while people are tapping into the Q&A, I guess I can start with the last equivalency, and that is that it weighs about as much as 4 cubic meters of volcanic rock. So if you know the density, then
it doesn't help me at all. Wow.
Did you tell everybody where the Q&A is underneath the 9 dots?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good.
So over on the 9 dots, there's a 9 dots on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can just click on that, and then you'll see a Q&A button, and then you can go ahead and enter into there. So we would love to. 300 tons Carrie is Carrie Myers, Cool Carrie's guesstimate. And let's see if we get anybody else to play. Okay, we've got Catherine Thompson is saying 3,000 pounds. Maybe we should sweeten the deal and give out a free Dirty Freehub hat if somebody actually gets this right. What do you think? I think, yeah, Aaron Biscuit.
I think we should. And we've
Okay.
got brand new, cool looking hats.
Yeah, we do. I don't even have one yet because I haven't been home, so I'm really looking forward to it. We've got 12,000. So Kevin, if you can help track us in 2 tons, 5,500 pounds. Robert says 4,000. We've got quite a range here.
So another one of my equivalencies was 22 cows.
22 cows. Oh, well, that helps narrow it down for sure. Are these beef cows? Are they dairy cows? Or are they Mexican cows? What kind of cows are we talking here? That might help me out a little bit more.
We're talking pretty standard American cow, I think.
Once down in Mexico, it would be a lot less. Okay, 15,000. Wow, Darlene. Okay. So, Kevin, do you think we got enough answers there, or should we wait a little bit more?
I think we're good. Let's try this.
Okay, Kevin, what was your guess? I didn't see one from you.
Well, I just did 22 cows. I'm thinking 44,000 pounds.
So, Kevin's cows are heavier than my cows. My vehicle equivalent was 6 Tacomas.
6
Right.
Tacomas. So if you know how much of a Tacoma truck weighs, then I guess you're good to go.
So what I calculated was about 25,000 pounds.
Ooh, I
Okay.
got.
Did we get anybody who was right?
No, I don't. I've got 15,000, I got 16,500, which I think is the closest.
Catherine just got closest to the pin.
All right, Catherine, you can drop me an email when I send out the follow-up emails, and we will figure out how to get you your free hat.
Yeah, she's the winner.
Winner, chicken dinner.
Cool looking hat.
Yeah, they are cool.
Okay.
Okay. Now back to this rock.
Yeah, so like while you're zooming down this trail and you just think, oh, there's just rocks, they're just kind of boring and featureless. If you have a close look at this big boulder, it's actually not boring at all. And so this is a picture of my finger, the scale. And if you look closely here, you can see that the rock texture is a mixture of quite large crystals in a really fine background ground mass. And then there's also a bunch of holes in it. So all of these features can tell us a bit about how this rock formed, where big crystals are caused when you have a magma chamber that's cooling slowly, giving time for the crystals to nucleate and then grow larger in this pool of magma, which is molten rock. And then being surrounded by really, really fine material indicates that it was erupted rapidly and then cooled fast. And then the presence of holes, which are like gas bubbles, indicate that this the composition of the magma had lots of dissolved gases in it. And so when that comes to the surface and the pressure is released, that like expands out into little gas bubbles in the rock. So there's kind of a whole story in just getting your nose under the rock and looking closely.
Now, Kim, will we find any fossils out there? I mean, when I was looking at that rock, I was hoping to see some kind of fossils. Is that a possibility, or is it just that it was so hot that it would have fried anything, that any living creature, or it was before, animals? Or tell me about that.
Yeah, volcanic rocks because of where the material comes from, which is out of magma chambers within the earth. So there's no animal life down there to be caught up in the rock. So you find fossils preserved in sedimentary rocks that have formed on the surface of the earth, but in volcanic rocks and also what's known as igneous rocks, things like granite, there's no fossil material in those types of rocks at all.
Interesting.
I'm sure we could find some interesting place in Oregon to explore that's got some nice sedimentary rocks and lots of fossils.
Yeah, there are.
So this picture is standing on the trail at the rock, just looking up to your right if you're heading out on the ride. And you can see, I'm sorry I don't have a pointer that I can use here, but the pale patch in the middle of the picture is where the rock came from. And so rocks fall off cliffs generally in this environment where it's very dry, but we get freezing temperatures. When water runs down cracks in the rocks, then it freezes, the water expands, and it just wedges open that crack just a little bit more. And then this process happens over and over and over again. And eventually the wedges push the rock out enough that gravity takes over and pulls it down. So all I'm happy about here is in its short fall out of this cliff, it's probably only a couple of meters up in the air, it had enough momentum to roll that extra half turn to get it over to the side of the trail rather than being squarely in the middle, because that might have been a problem.
That's fascinating. So it was not like some cyclist running up to the top of the rock and just pushing it down the hill. Absolutely no way. No. Okay.
No.
I know we tried to move it, and that was impossible. So I know our Dirty Roads crew had to do some work on moving parts of it, and that was just a nightmare. But anyways.
Yeah.
I think even the smaller chunks that are around it would probably weigh about a ton or a bit under.
And we did move the smaller chunks, but it took, I think it was 3 to 5 people with crowbars to move those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that we had when people signed up for this was, how many times has the route of the Deschutes River in this area been altered by volcanic events?
Interesting.
And I was able to find out a few things about this. So an interesting one was much earlier in the history, before this current river channel was in place, the Deschutes River actually ran to the east side of Pilot Butte, which, for people not from Bend, Pilot Butte is our resident town volcano that sits basically right in the middle of town. There's a little cinder cone that's a state park that's a prominent land feature in town. So the river used to run on the other side of that from where it is today, until that channel was filled with a lava flow over 100,000 years ago. Then the river came to the west side of the butte. And then about 75,000 years ago, more basalt flows pushed the river right up against Aubrey Butte to where its current course is. And then in the area of the lava and water route, recent lava flows from Lava Butte, which in this picture is what you're looking at across the river, that erupted about 7,000 years ago. When that eruption happened, the river was actually dammed at Benham Falls, which created this big lake that extended upstream through Sun River all the way to Lapine. And that lake sat there for about 4,000 years before the exit of the lake eroded enough to release the river back, broke the dam, and the river ran down its free course again.
So Kim, is that why, it's interesting. I've always wondered why when we're driving or riding our bikes out by Sun River, there'll be like these big open flat areas and we get tons of moon dust, and it's because we're in the bottom of a lake then. Is that correct? Is that what I hear you saying? Because it's for me, it's just such a different experience. It's really hard for us to find great routes out there because a lot of them are just so soft and dusty and flat, and not particularly, not always that interesting. And so that's what's hard for us to find routes out there. So that's just because it's the bottom of the lake bed, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So if you look at the geological map that I showed earlier and zoom out and go down to Sun River and Lapine area, you see this big area that is classified as recent sediments, and they are all young sediments. And so all that area is all covered in sediments that would have accumulated while it was a lake.
Interesting.
So this photo, while it's looking into the sun, is showing how a lot of the trail is on old rail lines. And this is a little bit of a cutting that would have been cut in to help smooth the rail line track. And this is, I guess, one of the reasons that we enjoy this route so much, that it offers gentle gradients that are much less common as soon as you go further west from Bend. And so this rail trail section is a remnant from Bend's logging heyday, when a whole lot of rail was built to transport logs back to the mills in Bend. And yeah, so you're kind of not necessarily thinking about that a lot, but it always strikes me when you ride through these sections that look like rail cuttings, and it's a reminder about the history of that.
Now, I know, Kevin, you're on this, and you've done a lot of digging in the history in this particular area. And this Bend used to be the biggest logging area in all of the United States or North America. That was the one I couldn't remember.
I believe it was there was a period of time in the early 1900s that Bend was the #1 producer of logs in the U.S., of timber, of harvested timber.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
So now we're at one of Linda's favorite spots. And it really is a highlight of this ride to go and look at the Benham Falls overlook, or viewpoints into this swirling canyon that sits above Benham Falls. And of course, things are there for a reason. And this is the result of a quite small outcrop of much older rock, a thing called a dacite dome, which is dated at nearly 2 million years. And this rock is very hard and erosion resistant. And so that's why it's constrained the river to this steep-sided narrow channel. And it goes back for it's about a quarter of a mile long. And Linda, we talked a little bit about how long would it take for the waterfall to just erode away and disappear.
Yeah, I figure eventually it would just kind of wear out. I mean, that water running through that rock eventually has got to grind it down. So I was kind of worried about my ride going away one of these days. And so I was asking you, should I be concerned? Should we start rewriting the ride guide now? And here was tell me about your response. I thought it was kind of funny.
Well, I think we're safe for now. So the rate that waterfalls erode what they're falling over is different depending on the rock type and whatever, but it's generally between sometimes as small as millimeters per year, and the really fast retreating ones might be 1 meter per year. And since we have a quarter mile of really hard rock to get through, I think we're good for quite a while on Benham Falls still being a fantastic feature.
And Kim, what type of rock did you say that was again?
It's called dacite, which is sort of a medium composition. So you've got basalt at one end and rhyolite at the other end, and the dacite's kind of in the middle, in intermediate amount of silica. But the way that this was erupted It's described as a dome, so it means it was a very slow kind of like just push up, and then the lava just like got cold in place. So it's very kind of homogeneous and just a hard resistant rock type.
Next time I go through Venom Falls, I'll look at it quite differently, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. So here we are crossing the river, and this takes us from the rocks of the Cascades across to rocks from the Newberry Volcanic System. And the Newberry Volcanic System is completely unrelated to the subduction zone and like our High Cascades Mountains. It's related to a bigger complex called the Brothers Fault Zone, which has been active for about 10 million years, and it extends all the way across to past Brothers to, now I've forgotten the name of the town, but way out into Eastern Oregon. And for a long time, this made just very broad, low shield volcanoes of basalt. But about 500,000 years ago, things started to get pretty exciting, and we got some explosive eruptions starting, which made the peaks that are that then exploded away to make East Lake and Paulina Lake in the Newberry Volcanic Zone. And so, and volcanism continued after that. So we're talking quite a long history here, over a few million years. And then there were quite significant eruptions around 12 million years ago, which covered the area south, well, probably where Lava Butte is, and south towards Sun River. And so they're the rocks that you ride onto as you start to make your way up the hill. But at the same time, when you're on that bike path, you can see to your left the lava flow just kind of like looming up above you, which is always quite striking.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then we get,
This is such an iconic shot that if you're a cyclist, you know this so well, because you're just going up that hill and you're thinking, okay, it's been really flat and easy until now, and I made the decision to tackle Lava Butte, and it's a short hill, but it's painful, but it's absolutely stunning.
it is. And I think one of the things that strikes me about the road climb is it's such a steady gradient. It's not like some, probably more when you're on gravel roads, you get like steep pinches and then a little bit of relief and then something steep and relief. This is just, I think it's 8%, and it's just 8% from the bottom to the top. And you can you spiral your way up around. And so what you're riding up here is a cinder cone. And this is the most common type of volcano in the world. So there's loads of these all over the place. And they're kind of, as far as volcanoes go, they're kind of friendly. They have a low ranking on the Volcanic Explosivity Index, which is something I learned about this week.
Oh, I'm glad to know that. That makes me much more happy to have them in our backyard.
Yeah, so they have a low volume of material and a low eruption intensity, which means that when they do erupt, the material stays relatively close to the ground as opposed to going like tens of kilometers up into the atmosphere. So cinder cones are generally associated with other volcanoes. So they often occur on the sides of large volcanoes or as volcanic fields, where you'll get a whole field of lots of cinder cones clustered together. And the way they form and evolve is the cinder part happens first. So you'll get this eruption and it'll do this fire fountaining, throw up all this basalt into the air, which forms little fragments and falls down into the cone. And this happens when you've got a sort of gaseous, explosive magma. But then the gas runs out and things calm down, and often that's when a lava flow will happen out of a cinder cone. And because the cinder cone is not consolidated, the lava flow, instead of coming up the middle and pouring down the top like the classic volcano that you draw in elementary school, the lava just gets to where it can get out, and it usually just runs out the side at the base. And that's what's happened here at Lava Butte, where on the kind of southwest side of the volcano, that's where the lava flow has come out.
It just sort of oozed out the side instead of blowing out the top. That's
Exactly. And so the shape of the cone is actually influenced by the dominant wind direction. So in the case of Lava Butte, the wind's coming from the southwest, which if you do ride to the top and look down into the crater that exists up there, you'll see that it's not symmetrical. It's higher on one side, and that's because the wind has like deposited more of the cinders on the northeast side. So that side is higher and bigger. So that's probably a factor in why the lava flow that came after squeezed out the thinner side on the southwest. So out of this volcano, about 90% of the volume is actually lava and only 10% is cinders. So now we have our first quiz question.
Oh, we like that. So again, you can use the Q&A section to answer this question. Go ahead, Kim, you want to read the question?
Sure. So large volcanoes like Mount Hood, they can be active for over 500,000 years. What is the lifespan of most cinder cones? We've got A, less than a year, B, 5,000 years, hardly any time in geological time, 50,000 years, or D, the same as a big volcano, 500,000 years.
Okay, what do you guys think? What say ye? A, less than a year. Ooh, C, Kevin, 50,000. Michelle, D, Charlie, File, A. Looks like Robert Wilcox might have a question. Let's see, where did you go, Robert Wilcox?
So Robert, I just made you a contributor, so you should be able to open your mic and ask your question if you got a question. But you need to accept being a contributor to do that.
He's declined it. Okay, that's fine. So what is the correct answer, Kim?
The answer is A, less than a year.
How is that possible?
So cinder cones are just single eruptive episodes. They start to erupt, and most of them actually last for less than a month.
A month.
And almost all of them are done with erupting in less than a year.
So we're going along, all of a sudden the cinder cone starts forming over a year, and then it explodes in less than a month. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, so the stage where it's erupting and making the cinders will probably last for less than a year, and more likely only less than 30 days. So they start and they complete in not very long at all.
Interesting.
So if you have a cinder cone like erupting next to your house, you can just go to Mexico for the winter, and then when you come home, it might be done. So just a bit more on cinder cones. So this photo, which is a beautiful photo, one thing that it shows really nicely is the slope of the cone, where you can see that rough, gravelly looking surface kind of angling up away from the cyclist. And the slope of these cones is kind of determined by the maximum angle at which the loose material can remain stable without collapsing. And so that's determined by how big the particles are and how roughly shaped they are. So small angular fragments will kind of interlock better, and so you can make a steeper cone with those rather than compared to large rounded fabrics, rounded particles. So the steepness of the cone is very much dictated by the type of material that's being produced by the volcano. And then if something happens at the base, like there's a big slip, landslidey type effect, then the cone will kind of like recalibrate and set its standard angle once again.
So Kim, we're starting to see, flowers and trees, out through our lava fields. Does that tell us anything about the age of the of when it erupted or when it oozed, I should say? What does that tell us about the area?
It's actually like relatively unvegetated. So the rate that vegetation will return to a fresh lava flow, it really depends on the climate. So like in Hawaii, sometimes vegetation can start growing on fresh lava within a couple of months, just because it has all the moisture, it's nice and warm, and as soon as a seed finds an opportunity in a little crack or something, it will start to grow vegetation. And then, often it's a number of decades before you start getting a reasonable amount of vegetation over a lava flow. But as you can see here, like in this photograph, all that dark black stuff in the mid-ground of the photo is basically bare lava. There are some little trees growing out there and some small bushes and things, but it has not really, the vegetation hasn't really gained traction in this environment, just because I think it's so dry, we've got the really cold winters, it's not very conducive to vegetation growing. So these rocks are about 6,000 years old, and we haven't seen a whole lot of growth in that time.
So my viewpoint from the top is pretty safe. We'll be able to ride that road for a long time with still being able to have that big open view, is what I hear you saying. Okay, great.
Absolutely, yes.
Good to know. Oh, another question.
So here's another quiz question. Just going back towards the center of the Newberry Volcanic Complex, which Lava Butte is a part of, but it's not the biggest volcano by any means. Yeah, and so I thought it was interesting seeing how old are the youngest rocks in the Newberry Volcanic Complex. And this photo actually is of those young rocks, and it's the obsidian flow there. So the options are 6,000 years, 12,000 years, 600 years, sorry, for A, 600, 1,200, 6,000, or 10,000 years.
Give us your answers now.
Oh, I think some people have been there and read the signs, because I'm seeing some correct answers.
Oh, I just guessed.
Yes. So the big obsidian flow in the Newberry Volcanic Complex is 12,000 years old. And I thought a really
12,000 or 1,200?
Oh, sorry, 1,200. Yes.
Okay.
1,200, 1,200 years old.
They're not very old.
Not very old. And
these are baby rocks.
They are baby rocks. And to put this into context, people have been living in this area for 10,000 years. And so there were, likely witnesses to these eruptions, which is, I think, just such a interesting idea.
Yeah, that I think of everything that we've talked about in preparing for this, that really blew my mind, is to think of people standing there and watching these things erupt. Must have just been insane. Can't imagine what they were thinking. God, I thought the world was ending for sure.
Indeed. So kind of related to that, so we have evidence that people were living around the Fort Rock area, which is near enough to Newberry, 10,000 years ago, and they had a bit of a manufacturing industry going on. And the question is, what was that manufacturing industry? Not multiple choice, because I wasn't creative enough to think of different options.
What? Flint napping. Oh, looks like we have somebody who's pretty smart there. Oh, we have two of them.
Yeah, and so the correct answer is sandals. And it possibly, I mean, I'd say likely that the other things that people have suggested with like arrowheads and flint, I'm sure that was going on too. And obsidian, obviously you've got a great source, so that was probably commonly used. But I think it was in the 1930s, an archaeologist from OSU was out exploring places around Fort Rock, and in a cave they found what are now thought to be the world's oldest pieces of clothing, and they were sandals woven from sagebrush bark and other fibers.
That's fascinating. I can't believe that. Here in Fort Rock, I can't believe they could find anything to make anything out of near Fort Rock. Maybe it was a little different back then.
Maybe a little. Though I guess it was pre-cows grazing away the vegetation. So yeah, the people who lived there, and I guess these lands were traditional lands of like Klamath and Modoc and Northern Paiute peoples, and so they could have been witness to the volcanic eruptions, including the big eruption of Mount Mazama that made Crater Lake 7,700 years ago. So that's my segue to Crater Lake. And another, this is the second last quiz question.
Crater Lake is 100 miles south of Bend. When Mount Mazama exploded to form Crater Lake, how far away was the volcanic ash deposited? 50 miles? 150 miles, which means that would include Bend in this area, 1,000 miles into Canada, or 1,600 miles into the Arctic. Anybody have any ideas? What do they think? A, B, C, or C?
No.
A, B, C, or C. I think we can assume that the Arctic one will be D. Into the Arctic, C. Okay, we have lots of C's.
Well, you double your chances if you pick C. So what I read was that ash from Mount Mazama has been found as far away as into Saskatchewan in Canada. So the first C is the correct answer for this quiz. And while we have a lot of ash around Bend and pumice and things like that, the Mount Mazama ash can actually be differentiated from any ash that came from the Newberry complex by the composition. And so it has different crystals in the mix, and the Mazama ash layers often overlie charcoal deposits because the whole enormous eruption and actually caused forest fires. So there's often a layer of ash from forest fires underneath the volcanic ash.
So, Kim and Linda, if people want to ask questions and do it by voice, they can raise their hand and I can make them a contributor. They need to accept being a contributor. And once they they need to make the acceptance, and then I can turn on their microphone, or they can turn on their microphone and actually ask you a question in person. So you can ask via the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and ask to be made a contributor.
Thank you, Kim. Okay.
So one of the questions we had early with the registration was, why is the soil around this area so sandy and devoid of volcanic matter, even though we have forests with trees and shrubs, compared to soil on just the other side of the Cascades? And while we do have forests and plenty of vegetation, I think this question comes back mostly to climate. So there's a couple of things going on here. Just the general dryness limits the biological activity in the soil, and so the fungi and the microbes don't have an optimum amount of moisture to work with. And also the types of plants we have here are different. So adaptations to dry climates often include features like smaller leaves, so less vegetation fall into the ground, and waxy coatings on leaves or hairy leaves that just make that conversion to rich biological material slower and less efficient. And a third factor is on the other side of the Cascades, there's often older volcanic rocks that are tens of millions of years old compared to the rocks here, which on the left side of the river in this photograph are only 6,000 years. And those older rocks have had time to weather more, creating clay weathering profiles, which adds to richer, deeper soil profiles.
Interesting. So these rocks are too young to be helpful for our plant life, is what I hear you saying.
That is one of the challenges, yes, along with the climate. I mean,
cool.
But an interesting thing that this question made me think about is how when you're on the section of the trail between Benham Falls and the bridge to Sun River, where you often get bitten by mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are a sign of just moisture around, right? So it just feels damper in there. And I've noticed that there's some different plant species in there as well. And in addition to the ponderosas, there's firs and species that normally on this side of the Cascades we only encounter at much higher elevations where there is that increased soil moisture.
Wow, that's incredible. I've never really noticed that. So next time I go through there, I'll have to take a look.
Don't stop for too long because you might get bitten by a mosquito.
Mosquitoes. Yeah, I know about the mosquitoes for sure. I know you're not lying on that. I've gotten eaten alive.
And for people who haven't ridden here, this is a photo of the fabulous tunnel that we have that allows us to go under Century Drive without having to deal with traffic, which I greatly appreciate. And I thought a really nice question we got asked is, being a really popular route, are there any considerations to ensure preservation of this beautiful landscape and route? How can we support and ensure sustainability of this route?
And that sounds like a question for Dirty Freehub. One of the strategies that we use quite frequently is to really spread people out. If you look at the number of routes that we have across Central Oregon, we're encouraging people to, ride out in Brothers, ride out towards Sisters, ride in a lot of different places. So even while this is very much of a crown jewel, I would say, of one of our routes, we have lots of other routes to offer people. And so that to me would be our number one strategy of how do we make sure that we're maintaining the viability of a route. We also, and when we're looking at routes, we do look at our impact, and we do a lot of education for cyclists on sustainability. We encourage them to pick up trash. We're encouraging them to go on work parties to keep these routes in great shape. And I'm going to pass this over to Kevin because he might have some additional insight too, because usually this is a good topic for him as well. Kevin?
Yeah, sustainability is going to become a really big topic. And because the National Forest Service has experienced such severe cuts over the last couple of years, many of the issues of sustainability of trails, roads, routes is going to come down to the nonprofits like Dirty Freehub, Central Oregon Trails Alliance, Deschutes Trails Coalition, and like. What you can do for sustainability is a couple of different things. One, all these organizations are looking for volunteers for work parties, and you can be a brusher, you can help, you can be a swamper, which is a person that helps a sawyer, you can become a certified sawyer. And sawyers are tremendously in need, so that's those you can help out at work parties. And let's say you don't have that physical capacity, you still can become an organizer of a work party and work with the nonprofits to do that. Or let's say you've got social media expertise, you can help out in that way. The other part is always to report issues that you see on trails. As we find an issue on a trail or road that something is not right, it's starting to wash out or deteriorate, the sooner we get a report on that issue, the better it is, because now it's only a small issue, but if it becomes a big issue, it's much more difficult to tackle. So reporting is another thing you can do. Another thing you can do is contribute dollars to those organizations. And I think one of the easiest things, and one of the things that's probably concerning me a lot nowadays, is the amount of trash that I'm starting to see in our national forests. One of the simple things you can do is, if you drive out to a trailhead, bring, in your car, in your truck, have some trash bags, a pair of rubber gloves, just pick up a bag of trash. I know Linda and I are doing that almost on every ride we do down in Mexico, of where we do that. Or you can also do something a little bit more adventuresome, which I call trash ride. If somebody has an old day pack, and you can start with it empty that day, and then as a riding group, hopefully fill that day pack up with trash that you find along the way. Those are some of the simple things I would recommend, but it is going to require a collective community to maintain the beautiful outdoor recreational spaces we have, because of the cuts we've seen at the national level. And we also know that state parks is experiencing financial difficulties also. So it's incumbent upon us who enjoy the outdoors to become more involved in stewardship. And if you are involved in stewardship, absolutely appreciate it. And if you got questions on it, you can send me an email at kevin@dirtyfreehub.org.
Thank you, Kevin. Back to you, Kim.
Thanks, Kevin. I guess one other thought I had with this, particularly when you're riding on routes that have busy sections, is just being super kind and courteous when there's other users, because it just, we want to represent cyclists as being positive contributors to the areas, and you don't want to scare people who've got little kids, so just slow down, take your time, and say hi, because that makes a world of difference.
So our final question, right?
It is. So the Deschutes River is an important water source for agriculture in Central Oregon. What percentage of the water rights is allocated to agriculture? This one I managed to get A, B, C, and D.
Awesome. Let's see, what are people thinking here?
Kevin knows the answer.
Yes.
It's a lot. 86% of the river flow goes to agriculture, which is just an enormous amount. It leaves very little for the base flow of the river. I guess this was motivated by a question of someone asking, is municipal use of water going to dry out the Deschutes Basin? And I think the answer of that is a very clear no, because the water rights for municipal use is only 2%. So agriculture is the big user.
Okay.
Kim, I've got one question, since we got about a minute left. If Newberry is not a subduction volcano, what causes its eruptions?
Yeah, so Newberry is part of this Brothers Fault Zone that I mentioned earlier. And so that's an area of extension in the crust. So the Earth's crust, but in that whole Eastern Oregon area is kind of being pulled apart very, very slowly. But so it's thinner, and that allows magmas to come up fractures and faults. And so there's a whole series of fractures across that region. And the Newberry Volcanic Center itself is the biggest expression of that volcanism, but there's a whole lot of volcanoes all over Eastern Oregon out towards Burns that are part of that same system.
Interesting.
I think
Okay.
we should go to the next slide, right?
So for those of you who've really enjoyed Kim, I know I certainly always appreciate her insight into how things on the surface look, and then they're very, very different. She makes it all sound so exciting. She also has other podcasts. If you're not familiar with Hayrick Butte, which is out near Sisters, that's a really, really interesting butte. She's also done Untangling the History of the Wallowa Mountains, which is a mountain range in Northeast Oregon. And then all about the basalts, or the basalts, as you say, Kim. And these are formations you will find all over Central and Eastern Oregon. And then finally, she also did another podcast on hoodoos and Lake Billy Chinook cliffs, which are near Redmond. So we really, really appreciate Kim's continuous enthusiasm for educating our cycling community on all of these topics. And so she does this as a volunteer. So let's go ahead and give her a nice applause from the group. And we will go ahead and wrap this up. You can go ahead and stay on if you have additional questions, and we will go ahead and open up your microphones and you can ask questions directly. But I would not be a good executive director unless I didn't remind you that Dirty Freehub is funded by your kind donations. I know there's lots of donors that are on this call tonight, and I deeply, deeply appreciate that. So